The vanishing fleet, the signal in the void. The sensor arrays of the Zephyrian Collective had been silent for weeks. In the Grand Command Center of Nexus Prime, Admiral Kekstar stood before a wall of holographic displays, his 6 arms folded behind his chitinous back. A Zephyrian empire stretched across 3,000 star systems, each one catalogued, controlled, and conquered. For 800 years, they had been the undisputed masters of this galaxy. Nothing moved without their knowledge. Nothing existed without their permission. That's why the signal from Sector Null made his primary heart skip a beat. "Sir?" called Lieutenant Vexena from her station, her voice tight with confusion. "We're receiving an unidentified transmission from the Void Sector." Kekstar's mandibles clicked in annoyance. The Void Sector was empty space, had been for centuries. No planets, no asteroids, no life. Just the endless black between spiral arms, where even pirates feared to venture. "Specification," he demanded, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the command deck. "Unknown origin, unknown technology, unknown language," Vexena replied, her secondary eyes focused on the scrolling. "Data. The signal is ... primitive, Admiral. Chemical propulsion signatures, basic electromagnetic communications. Like something from the pre-space era." Kekstar's laugh was like grinding stone. "Primitive signals from empty space. Perhaps some ancient probe, drifting for millennia, finally sending its last transmission before dying. The Empire had encountered such ghosts before. Deploy a reconnaissance probe," he ordered. "Standard protocols." "Sir," Vexena hesitated. "The signal." "It's not. Random. There's a pattern. Almost like it's calling for something." The Admiral's 4 eyes narrowed. In 800 years of expansion, the Zephyrian Collective had never encountered a mystery they couldn't solve within hours. Their databases contained the genetic patterns of every sentient species in the galaxy. Their historical records tracked every civilization that had ever achieved spaceflight. Their military had crushed every rebellion, absorbed every resistance. They were the apex predators of the cosmos. The confident fleet 3 days later. Battle Group Omega prepared for departure. 15 ships of the Imperial fleet, led by the massive Dreadnought Dominion's pride, Captain Zorthek, Kekstar's most trusted commander, stood on the bridge reviewing final preparations. "Overkill," muttered Commander Hexler, the ship's tactical officer. 15 ships for a ghost signal. "We could investigate this with a single frigate." Zorthik's compound eyes gleamed with amusement. "The Admiral wants to be thorough. Besides, when was the last time we had a real mystery to solve? The crew could use the exercise." The fleet consisted of 3 heavy cruisers, 4 destroyers, 6 frigates, a support carrier, and the flagship Dreadnought. Each ship carried enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. The combined fleet could have conquered most primitive civilizations. Single-handedly, they jumped to hyperspace with casual confidence, expecting to return within the week with samples, data, and another footnote in the Empire's endless catalog of the conquered. The last transmission from Battle Group Omega came exactly 47 hours later. "Signal source located. Investigating. Will report within 6 hours." Then silence. The search begins. Admiral Kekstar paced the command center like a caged predator. 6 hours had become 12, then 24, then 48. Battle Group Omega had vanished as completely as if they had never existed. "Sir?" Vexena's voice was barely a whisper. "Long-range sensors show ... nothing. No ships, no debris, no energy signatures. It's like they just ... disappeared." Kekstar's claws extended unconsciously, scraping against the deck plating. In 8 centuries, the Zephyrian military had never lost contact with an entire battle group. Individual ships might suffer mechanical failures or encounter spatial anomalies, but 15 ships? Impossible. Deploy recovery drones, he ordered. Maximum range, full sensor suite. I want to know what happened to my ships. The drones launched immediately, their sleek forms disappearing into hyperspace. Unlike the manned vessels, the drones were expendable, automated, designed to investigate dangerous situations and return with data regardless of the risk. 2 days later, 3 of the 12 drones returned. The other 9 had also vanished without a trace. The wreckage field, the footage from the surviving drones, played on the main display, and for the first time in his career, Admiral Kekstar felt something he had never experienced before: uncertainty. Wreckage fields stretched across several thousand kilometers of space. Pieces of Zephyrian ships drifted in the void, their hulls torn open, not by energy weapons or explosive charges, but by something else entirely. The metal was sheared, twisted, as if the ships had been grabbed by invisible claws and simply ripped apart. Analysis, Kekstar demanded. The damage patterns are unusual, sir, reported Chief Scientist Velkar, his voice trembling. These ships weren't destroyed by conventional weapons. The hull breaches suggest kinetic impact, but not from missiles or projectiles. Something physically tore these ships apart. Kekstar studied the images. The Dominion's pride of the Imperial fleet, had been split nearly in half. Its massive fusion reactors had been surgically removed, leaving perfectly circular holes in the ship's superstructure. The precision was unsettling. What about survivors? He asked, though he already knew the answer. None detected, sir. But ... double quotes. Velkar hesitated. We did find this. A new image appeared on the screen, carved into the hull of one of the destroyers. In crude, but readable Zephyrian script, was a message. You forgot US. We remember everything. Below it, etched with the same rough precision, was a symbol that made Kekstar's blood freeze. A simple circle with 2 curved lines, the ancient symbol of Terra, the 3rd planet of the Sol System, the planet they had sterilized 300 years ago. Asterisk the impossible truth. Impossible, Kekstar breathed. Humans are extinct. We made sure of that. The Great Purge of Sol had been one of the Empire's most thorough operations. When the humans had refused to submit to Zephyrian rule, the Empire had responded with overwhelming force. Biological weapons had been deployed on every human colony. Their home planet had been bombarded until its surface was molten glass. Every human ship had been hunted down and destroyed. The extinction of humanity had been confirmed by the Empire's most trusted scientists. Their DNA had been catalogued, their culture archived, their very existence reduced to a historical footnote. For 300 years, humanity had been nothing more than a cautionary tale about the price of defying the Zephyrian collective. Yet here was their symbol, carved into the hull of a destroyed Imperial ship. Sir, Vexena called out, her voice urgent. We're receiving another transmission from the Void Sector. The signal was clearer this time, no longer the primitive babble they had first detected. It was broadcast on Imperial frequencies, using Imperial encryption codes that should have been impossible for any non-Zephyrian to possess. The voice that spoke was unmistakably human rough, tired, filled with centuries of accumulated rage. Attention, Zephyrian Collective. You believe you erased us from history. You believe your records are complete. You are wrong. We survived your genocide. We adapted. We learned. We remember every world you burned, every child you murdered, every life you stole. Your empire is built on lies, and we are the truth you tried to bury. We are coming for you. We are the ghosts of Terra, and this galaxy will know what you did. To us, the transmission ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. The growing panic Admiral Kekstar stood motionless for long minutes, his mind racing. If humans had survived, where had they been hiding? How had they developed technology capable of destroying an entire imperial battle group? How had they remained undetected for 3 centuries? Sir, Valkar spoke hesitantly. The metallurgy. Analysis is complete. The weapons used against our ships, they're not energy-based. They appear to be some form of advanced kinetic system, but the projectiles seem to have been guided with impossible precision. And, sir, the metal composition of the projectiles matches Terran industrial standards from before the Purge. Kekstar felt his certainty crumbling. The Empire's strength had always come from complete knowledge, total control. They knew where every enemy was, what every species could do, how every technology worked. But these humans, these supposed ghosts, had been invisible to them for 3 centuries. Contact High Command, he ordered. Priority 1. We have a situation that requires immediate attention. As the communication array powered up, Kekstar stared at the wreckage field displayed on the main screen. Somewhere in the dark between the stars, humanity had not only survived, but had been watching, planning, preparing for this moment. The empire that had ruled the galaxy for 800 years had just discovered they were not alone, and the beings they had tried to exterminate were coming for them. The revelation, within hours, the news reached the highest levels of the Zephyrian government. Emergency sessions were called, databases were searched, and panic began to spread. Through the corridors of power, the impossible had happened. A species they had declared extinct was not only alive, but actively hostile. Admiral Kekstar received new orders within 6 hours. Find and destroy any remaining human presence, by any means necessary. The Empire's reputation for invincibility could not be allowed to crumble. But as he prepared the largest military force in Zephyrian history, Kekstar couldn't shake the feeling that they were already too late. The humans had been planning this for 300 years. They had studied Zephyrian technology, learned imperial tactics, and somehow developed weapons that could destroy the Empire's finest ships. The signal from the Void Sector continued to broadcast, growing stronger each day. And with each transmission, more impossible evidence emerged. Human ships were moving through imperial space, undetected by the most advanced sensor networks in the galaxy. Supply convoys were disappearing. Outposts were going dark. The humans weren't just alive, they were hunting. As Kekstar stood on the bridge of his flagship, preparing to lead the largest fleet in imperial history into battle against an enemy that wasn't supposed to exist, he realized that everything the Empire thought it knew about the galaxy was wrong. They had tried to erase humanity from existence. Instead, they had created something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. An enemy with nothing left to lose, and 3 centuries of rage to fuel their vengeance. The records had indeed shown nothing about surviving humans. But those records were about to be rewritten in blood and fire across the stars. The ghost of Terra. Survivors haven deep in the asteroid field of the Kepler 442 system. Hidden within a hollowed-out planetoid, Captain Sarah Chun stood before a wall of monitors showing imperial fleet movements across the galaxy. Her weathered face bore the scars of 3 centuries of hiding, fighting, and surviving in the spaces between civilizations. Around her, the command center of New Terra hummed with quiet efficiency. Humans worked alongside repurposed Zephyrian technology, their movements precise and purposeful. These were the descendants of refugees, the children of survivors, the inheritors of humanity's greatest tragedy and greatest triumph. Captain, called Marcus Rivera, her chief of operations. Long-range sensors confirm the destruction of Battle Group Omega. The message was received across 12 imperial sectors. Sarah nodded, her gray eyes reflecting the glow of the tactical displays. At 73, she was one of the younger leaders of New Terra, born long after the Great Purge, but raised on the stories of Earth's burning skies and humanity's desperate flight into the dark. "How are the other cells responding?" she asked. "Phoenix Station reports successful raids on 3 supply convoys in the Outer Rim. The Nomad fleet has taken out 2 communication relays in Sector 7, and the Deep Space Mining Collective has confirmed they're ready to reveal themselves when you give the word." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. For 300 years, scattered groups of human survivors had been playing a careful game of hide and seek with the Zephyrian Empire. They had learned to think like their enemies, to use imperial technology against itself, to survive in the cracks and shadows of a galaxy that believed them extinct. They had also learned patience. The long game. The truth about humanity's survival was far more complex than the Empire could imagine. When the Zephyrian fleet had arrived to demand Earth's submission, a small group of far-sighted leaders had already begun secret evacuation protocols. Not millions of humans had escaped. The Empire had been too thorough for that, but thousands had managed to slip away in converted cargo ships, mining vessels, and research platforms. They had scattered across the galaxy, hiding in asteroid fields, dead systems, and the forgotten corners of space where even the Empire's vast surveillance network couldn't reach. Some groups had thrived, building hidden colonies and developing new technologies. Others had barely survived, clinging to life in damaged ships and makeshift habitats. But they had all shared one thing: the memory of what had been done to their species. For 3 centuries, they had watched the Empire expand, cataloging its movements, studying its technology, learning its weaknesses. They had infiltrated its communication networks, stolen its databases, and slowly, carefully, built a picture of their enemy that was more complete than the Empire had of itself. They had also prepared for this moment. "Sarah," called Elena Vasquez, the colony's head of intelligence, "we're receiving confirmation from our assets throughout the Empire. The leadership is in full panic mode. They're mobilizing everything they have." Sarah turned to face the tactical display showing the deployment of Imperial forces. Red dots indicated Zephyrian fleets, blue showed human positions, and yellow marked the locations of other species that had suffered under Imperial rule. "Then it's time," she said quietly. "Send the activation codes to all cells. Operation Lazarus is now active." The awakening across the galaxy, dormant human installations suddenly came alive. Hidden bases that had masqueraded as abandoned mining stations for decades revealed themselves as fully operational military facilities. Cargo ships that had spent years moving through Imperial space as harmless merchants suddenly deployed weapons that shouldn't have existed. The humans had learned from their defeat. Where once they had been a single species on a single world, they were now scattered across thousands of star systems. Where once they had relied on conventional weapons and tactics, they had developed new technologies, specifically designed to counter Zephyrian advantages. Most importantly, they had learned not to fight fair. Asterisk, the first phase of Operation Lazarus targeted the Empire's communication network. Human infiltrators, some of whom had been posing as loyal Imperial citizens for decades, simultaneously struck at relay stations across dozens of sectors. Within hours, large portions of the Imperial fleet found themselves cut off from Central Command. The second phase hit the supply lines. Zephyrian forces were formidable, but they required vast amounts of resources to maintain their equipment and feed their troops. Human raiders, using ships that had been specifically designed to avoid Imperial sensors, struck at cargo convoys with surgical precision. But the third phase was the most devastating. The truth. The broadcast era stood in the communication center of New Terra, preparing to address the galaxy. Behind her, technicians worked to override every major broadcast network in Imperial space. This would be a message that every being in the galaxy would hear, whether the Empire wanted them to or not. "Citizens of the galaxy," she began, her voice carrying across thousands of light years. You have been told that humanity is extinct. You have been told that we were destroyed because we refused to submit to imperial rule. These are lies. The broadcast continued, showing archived footage of the Great Purge, testimonies from survivors, and evidence of the Empire's systematic genocide of not just humans, but dozens of other species that had dared to resist. The Zephyrian Empire has ruled through fear and deception for 800 years. They have told you that submission is the only path to survival. They have convinced you that resistance is futile. But we are proof that they are wrong. Across the galaxy, beings of hundreds of different species watched in stunned silence as the truth unfolded before them. The Empire had not just conquered worlds, it had erased entire civilizations from history, claiming they had never existed. We are humanity's children, Sarah continued. We are the survivors of Terra, and we are not alone. The rebellion spreads. The effect was immediate and devastating. Within days of the broadcast, uprisings began on dozens of imperial worlds. Species that had been subjugated for centuries suddenly found the courage to resist. The Empire's carefully maintained image of invincibility crumbled as world after world rose in rebellion. Admiral Kekstar watched the reports flooding in from across the Empire with growing desperation. The humans hadn't just survived, they had become a catalyst for the complete breakdown of imperial control. His fleet was being deployed to put down rebellions on worlds that had been peaceful for generations. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Vexena, her voice strained, "we're receiving word from High Command. You are ordered to locate and destroy the human leadership immediately. The Empire is ... The Empire needs this ended quickly." Kekstar understood. The longer the humans remained free, the more the Empire's authority would erode. But finding them would be nearly impossible. The humans had spent 3 centuries learning to hide, and they were very good at it. That's when the challenge came. The message arrived on imperial frequencies, broadcast directly to Kekstar's flagship. It was from the human captain, the one calling herself Sarah Chun. Admiral Kekstar. Her voice was calm, almost conversational. "I know you're looking for us. I know the Empire has tasked you with ending this rebellion, so let me make it simple for you." She provided coordinates to a system on the edge of imperial space, in a region that had been considered strategically worthless. "Bring your fleet. Bring everything you have. We'll be waiting. It's time to finish what your empire started 300 years ago." Kekstar stared at the coordinates, his tactical mind analyzing the trap this had to be. No military commander would willingly reveal their position to a superior force unless they had some overwhelming advantage. But he had no choice. The Empire was crumbling, and the humans were the key to everything. If he could destroy their leadership, cut off the head of the rebellion, the Empire might be able to restore order. He gave the order to jump to hyperspace. The final battle, the human fleet that awaited Kekstar, was unlike anything in Imperial records. The ships were sleek, angular, built for speed and stealth rather than brute force. But they were numerous, far more numerous than should have been. Possible for a supposedly extinct species. Analysis. Kekstar demanded as his sensors swept the enemy formation. "Sir?" his tactical officer replied, voice tight with confusion. "The human ships. They're not just using unknown technology. They're using our technology. Zephyrian weapons. Zephyrian shields, but modified in ways our engineers say should be impossible." Sarah Chun's voice came over the communication channel. "Surprised, Admiral? We've had 300 years to study your technology. We know your ships better than you do." The battle that followed was unlike anything in the Empire's military history. The humans didn't fight like a traditional fleet. They moved in coordinated swarms, their smaller ships darting between the massive Imperial dreadnoughts like angry insects. Their weapons targeted specific subsystems with surgical precision, disabling rather than destroying whenever possible. But most importantly, they fought with a desperation and determination that the Empire's professional soldiers couldn't match. These weren't career military officers fighting for pay and advancement. These were the survivors of genocide, fighting for their right to exist. The new dawn. The battle ended not with the destruction of one side or the other, but with the arrival of reinforcements that changed everything. Ships from dozens of different species, united under the banner of the Galactic Liberation Front, emerged from hyperspace around the battlefield. Admiral Kekstar found himself surrounded not just by humans, but by representatives of every species the Empire had conquered or oppressed. The rebellion had spread beyond his worst fears. "Admiral?" Sarah Chun's voice came over the communication channel one final time. "Your empire is finished. The galaxy knows the truth now. Your people can join us in building something better, or they can go down with the ship. The choice is yours." Looking at his tactical display, seeing the overwhelming force arrayed against him, Kekstar made a decision that would have been unthinkable just days before. He ordered his remaining ships to stand down. The Zephyrian Empire, ruler of 3,000 star systems for 800 years, surrendered to the ghosts of a species they thought they had erased from existence. Epilogue. The new galaxy 6 months later. Sarah Chun stood on the observation deck of the newly established Galactic Council Station, watching ships from hundreds of different species work together to build a new form of government. The Empire was gone. Its leaders either fled to the Outer Rim or facing justice for their crimes. Humanity had not just survived, it had helped to free an entire galaxy. Marcus Rivera joined her at the observation window. "Any regrets?" he asked. Sarah considered the question. 3 centuries of hiding, of planning, of preparing for this moment. Generations of humans who had lived and died in the shadows, never seeing their home star. "No," she said finally. "Our ancestors would be proud. We didn't just survive the attempt to erase us. We made sure it could never happen to anyone else." In the depths of space, the signal from New Terra continued to broadcast, no longer a call for vengeance, but a beacon of hope. The records had shown nothing about human survival, but now the galaxy would never forget that humanity had refused to quietly disappear into the dark. They had endured, they had remembered, and they had returned to remind the universe that some things are worth fighting for, no matter the cost.